Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, September the 2nd, 2025. Today, Mercury moves into Virgo, and this is something I want to talk about. Mercury is moving into its own sign, and that might mean that things connected with Mercury become sort of stronger and more pronounced. So that's one thing I want to discuss in this video. I also want to look at the assassination of the Ukrainian politician Andriy Parubiy, who was shot in the city of Lvov in western Ukraine on Saturday. I think that was Saturday, August the 30th. I don't have his time of birth, but I have a date of birth. I also have the exact time of his assassination. So, that was a fairly big event, and I think that is something I'm going to be looking at later in this video. But before I look at Mercury in Virgo and this assassination, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, September the 2nd. So here is the chart for today, set for noon, New York time on Tuesday today. And don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So turning to this chart, the moon is in Capricorn. So the moon goes into Capricorn Tuesday at 2:45 in the morning, London time. So if you're in Europe, Africa, by the time you wake up, probably the moon will be in Capricorn. It will go into Capricorn later in the day if you're in Asia or Australasia. But, it's a pretty moon in Capricorn day. And, it's not just the moon in Capricorn. We've got the sun in Virgo as well. So the moon in Capricorn applying to a trine of the sun in Virgo. So when you've got the sun and moon, both in earth signs, that says something about the day. People are focusing on what matters. The material details can't be ignored, shouldn't be ignored, and it can be quite a down-to-earth day. And additionally, we've got Mercury moving into Virgo, so the sort of earth signs are starting to be emphasized. It wasn't so long ago, but we didn't really have any planets in Earth. Except for the South Node in Virgo. We had the moon moving through earth signs every now and then, but it was a fairly ungrounded time. But now with those three planets in earth signs, it's perhaps asking us to look at things in another way, to get real. Perhaps, over the summer or winter, if you're in the southern hemisphere, there's been maybe a lot of speculative thinking. Things haven't been really very grounded. People might have had lots of ideas and so forth. But where was it all going? But now people are having to face reality. And so that might be an element of what's happening today. Though when the moon moves into Capricorn, it does make a square to Neptune. So, perhaps at the beginning of the day, there might be some concerns about whether things are real. And of course, the moon doesn't just make a square to Neptune, it makes a square to Saturn just before it moves into Capricorn. But I think that's very much at the beginning of the day. And I think it's perhaps more important to think about, what is real and how do we address material realities. And it might not always be easy. There may be particular issues we have to deal with. Mercury, when it moves into almost as it is about to move into Virgo, it does make a quincunx with Saturn. So Mercury in very, very late Leo makes an 150-degree aspect to Saturn. So, for some of us, there may be a feeling of having to deal with reality. Mercury in those last few minutes of Leo makes that quincunx to Saturn, and we have all our ideas. We're having to faced reality, and it's not easy. And then Mercury changes sign, and we realize that we can't just worry about it forever. We've instead, got to do something about it. But don't forget that the moon is trine the sun, and the moon trine sun, as I've just said, it's a good aspect. It's an aspect that is quite sort of harmonious, and so it might allow us to adapt to changing circumstances. And if we have to be more real and perhaps have sort of less speculative thinking, well, I think that is something that we can deal with. But as far as what the main thing going on today is, it's Mercury moving into Virgo. Now, Mercury moves into Virgo, if you're interested, at 2:23 p.m. London time, which is 3:23 p.m. sort of in Paris or Rome. So that would be sort of early afternoon that Mercury moves into Virgo. If you're in the Americas, then it would be 6:23 in the morning in California, 9:23 in the morning if you're in New York. So at a fairly early stage, Mercury moves into Virgo if you're in the Americas. And I think that is about it. And so let me now look at the viewpoint from the perspective of Australasia. So here is a picture for sort of noon in Sydney, as a representative of Australia and New Zealand and East Asia. And so at noon Sydney, the moon is at 0 degrees 8 Capricorn. So by the early afternoon, whether you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon will be in Capricorn. So certainly the last half of the day, you've got moon in Capricorn. So not necessarily a huge difference between the experience of those of you in Australasia and those of you in the Americas. If you are in Australasia, then possibly the main aspect is not so much moon trine sun, but it might be that moon square Saturn, moon square Neptune. And so in Australasia, things might seem a bit more difficult than in the Americas or in Europe. Things might be harder work and there's more to battle against, but don't worry, you'll get through in the end. And then there is the heliocentric view. So here is the chart with the sun at the center of the solar system. And sorry to be boring, but we continue to have this grand trine in water signs, in heliocentric water signs. I don't know to what extent we can look at elements in heliocentric charts, but heliocentrically we've still got Mars trine Jupiter. In fact, that Mars trine Jupiter is very close. Mars and Jupiter are now sort of 7 minutes apart. So today is the day when that Mars-Jupiter trine becomes exact. And, I've been suggesting that this Mars-Jupiter trine isn't necessarily positive. It can be about excessive energy, taking things too far, overreacting. And then you throw the Earth in there as well. Earth is still making a trine to Mars, trine to Jupiter. So it's still there, and things could still get out of control, at least on a collective level. I think on a personal level, maybe you need to take this Mars-Jupiter trine and see it as energetic. And if there is something that you want to really put your energy into, and provided you're disciplined and focused, it could work quite well for you. Additionally, we have Mercury making a square to Chiron. So Mercury is also making a trine to Saturn. So Mercury square Chiron trine Saturn. Well, Mercury square Chiron can be about saying things, thinking things, which can be quite disruptive, wanting to be a maverick, wanting people to listen. But then Mercury trine Saturn is more disciplined. It's about maybe, coming down to earth and accepting things, as they are. And, don't forget that geocentrically, we have Mercury quincunx Saturn, and then heliocentrically we've got Mercury trine Saturn. So, now might be a time when we can indeed bring ourselves down to earth and deal with reality, as it is, and that is something we can do. It might not be much fun, but it's always good to be realistic, and we shouldn't forget, looking at everything overall, there are a lot of planets in Earth signs, and so that can be a call for all of us to come down to Earth. So now let's look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, September the 2nd, 2025. Aries. It's a day which looks productive, when you can be focused and you can decide what is important, and part of that is connected with the fact that the moon is now in Capricorn, and the moon in Capricorn, it's a very grounded place for the moon, and Aries sometimes resents being grounded, wants to do things its way, but Aries does know how to look after itself, especially when the moon is in Capricorn. And so, if something is important to you, then go for it, make an impression. And you might be, ever so slightly embarrassed about being practical and pointing out practical issues. You might think that that's not a particularly cool thing to do, but it's appropriate because of the moon's placement in Capricorn. And if you want to look after your own interests, you certainly can. And so if something is important to you and your material well-being, then go for it. And if you're going into work, for example, then it's okay to be dynamic, but yes, practical, and you can get away with it. And your ability to lead and to organize should be pretty good. You don't have to go to work to lead and to organize. You can do it anywhere. You can do it in your own home. And the moon is making a trine to the sun. Again, very practical, and it's a reminder that the sun is in Virgo. Mercury is now moving into Virgo, and so Aries, you have to take on board. What does it mean for this Virgo emphasis? Sun and Mercury in this sign. Virgo, from a Aries perspective, is it's quite a disciplined sign. It's making sure that everything is in order, everything is laid out properly, that nothing is left to chance, and that broadly speaking should be your approach. And so you could say that you're not quite being yourself at the moment, but it's all about balance. There are times, Aries, when you can zoom off and do your own thing, and be an explorer, be an adventurer, and be hyper creative. And I'm not saying you can't be creative, but you do have to consider what is important right now. And there are ways in which you can gain from ongoing circumstances. Things happen which aren't always good. People are inconvenienced. They're inconvenienced, they run into difficulties, they need help, and you're there. You're always there. And so the fact that you are there, you can be of assistance, even when things really are, very difficult for other people, can work in your best interests. It can work in everyone's interests, but you are around, and it's possible in certain situations that someone else's loss could be your gain. I'm not saying it needs to be a zero-sum situation where something bad happens, you benefit, and your benefit is someone else's loss. It could be a situation where you help someone out, they benefit, perhaps they reward you, but your rewards can work on different levels. There could be a financial reward, but there could also be a reward in terms of your sort of overall reputation. Taurus, there are now quite a lot of planets in Earth signs. So we've got the moon now in Capricorn. Mercury is moving into Virgo, and of course the sun is already in Virgo. And so from a Taurean perspective, I would have regarded that as being pretty good news. I mean, it means that you are in your element, with all this earth. You can see how things are laid out. Things are more straightforward than usual, and you can sort of attend to the details that matter. And it's nothing boring. There's nothing boring about it at all, though. It's about being fairly down to earth about it, and looking at what is important, what matters to you, and if there's something that you need to do, then you can do it well. But the earth has its own spirituality to it, so don't forget the spiritual side of things. So if you want to get involved with the soil and the environment and plants, then now might be a time to do it. And maybe over the last few months you felt that there wasn't sufficient grounding. Perhaps you felt that other people weren't particularly grounded. People were talking about all sorts of nonsense, and it was all pie in the sky garbage. And now things have changed, and it is becoming more real, and it's becoming real in a way that suits you. And while you can be realistic and you're not going to do anything crazy, you can also see possibilities. There are possibilities, all over the place. And, over the last couple of days, many Taurians have been quite optimistic and positive, and you've seen possibilities, and it continues. And you can see how things could be done, how things could work. And, this means that you continue to be, pretty enthusiastic, and perhaps things are even better now because you're not just being enthusiastic, but you can actually see the process by which something can be achieved. It's all very well being positive, but what is the grounds for being positive? It may have no grounds whatsoever, but with these planets moving into Earth signs, with Moon, Sun, Mercury moving into Earth signs, you can see the path ahead, and you can actually see what needs to be done. And if you feel that things are moving too slowly, then you may be in a position where you can maybe force the pace. I mean, there's nothing wrong with forcing the pace if necessary. And so, some Taurians, they might have an impatient streak, and that can be a good or a bad thing. Sometimes people are too slow, and you just want action, and you want them to do something practical and get on with it. And in that situation, it's good to be pushy, good to be demanding, but impatience can be inappropriate. It can happen at the wrong time, and in your hurry to get something done, you might trip up, literally or metaphorically, and that would be, I think, really quite unnecessary. So do have some patience, but you don't have to have too much patience. You need to be relatively demanding, and you need to expect things to happen in a timely way. Gemini, Mercury is changing sign, and Mercury is your ruler, and so that's got to be a big deal. So the question is Mercury's sign change, moving from Leo into Virgo, is it a good thing? Well, I think it probably is a good thing. I mean, Mercury moving into its own sign has got to help you, but you've got to look at it in the right way. Mercury moving into Virgo for you, Gemini, could be quite grounding. You've got to consider what matters, what is important, and in certain situations that might feel rather boring. I mean, you want action, you want excitement. That is a Gemini thing. And you've just had Mercury moving through Leo, and with Mercury moving through Leo, you might have had a relatively high opinion of yourself, even if not everyone else had appreciated that or appreciated you. But now with Mercury moving into Virgo, you need to be real, and that is the best way of handling this energy, because Mercury, it has two sides to it. There is the Gemini side to Mercury, because Mercury rules Gemini, which perhaps is something that you're more familiar with. But then there's the Virgo side, and the Virgo side, is the earthy side to Mercury. It's Mercury which is able to process details, is to process information and decide what is important, and to discriminate. Now, discriminate, when I say discriminate, I don't mean discriminate between people, to discriminate between the good and the bad, to have prejudice. I don't mean discriminate like that. I mean discriminate as in deciding, what is important and what is not important. And that's something that Geminis often have to do, because, Geminis can fill themselves with, a huge amount of information. They can be interested in lots of different things, but what really matters? I mean, okay, you may be able to multitask up to a point, although I think Gemini's ability to multitask is exaggerated. I think ideally Geminis will just focus on one or two things and nothing else. And perhaps with Mercury moving into Virgo, you start to realize what's important. And it might mean that some tough choices have to be made, because Mercury, as it's moving into Virgo, makes a quincunx with Saturn. So Mercury and Saturn are 150 degrees apart. So that's Mercury in very, very late Leo, quincunx Saturn in very late Pisces. And there may just be a moment, especially at the beginning of the day, when you feel down, where you're thinking, how are you going to be able to manage this? You perhaps feel that you've hit a block. You've hit an obstacle that it cannot be resolved. And then Mercury moves into Virgo, and that is the resolution. You just have to make sure that everything is properly dealt with. Yeah, you have to be organized, and it's boring. But it can also be very satisfying, strangely. And it may actually be, Gemini, that if you want to be a real individual, if you want to stand out as someone special, you've now got to do the work. You've got to make sure that everything is really dealt with. And because if it's not dealt with, you're never going to shine. No one will ever know who you are. I mean, maybe that's an exaggeration. Maybe I'm projecting. But do consider that possibility. And so, overall, I think that Mercury moving into Virgo is a good thing. And it does allow you to ground yourself. And you need to think ahead. Mercury is not going to be in Virgo forever. It will move on. And to be more precise, Mercury goes into Libra, I think on sort of September the 18th. So Mercury is moving pretty quickly at the moment. So you've just got a few weeks now, between now and just before the equinox, to make sure that everything is sorted out, and then the rest of the year should run pretty well for you. Provided you do what's expected of you, and do take advantage of Saturn moving back into Pisces, by the way, because yesterday Saturn moved into Pisces, and with Saturn moving into Pisces, I think that you really do have an opportunity to get something back on the track. So if you feel that you had some aim, something you were trying to achieve, and it hasn't worked, and you feel that there's no way it can be be brought back to life. Well, you'd be wrong there, because with Saturn moving into Pisces, back into Pisces, you've got a real chance, and it's not too late. Just remember that. Cancer. The moon is moving into Capricorn. It's moving into your opposite sign, and so moon moving into Capricorn, well, it does make you more down to earth. I mean, Capricorn is a very down to earth sign, and it's not just that we've got the moon in Capricorn. We've got the sun in Virgo, and the Mercury is also moving into Virgo. So Cancer, today you might find yourself thinking about your own interests, and there is a certain selfishness to moon in Capricorn. I mean, I think that is inevitable. I mean, the moon is supposedly fallen in Capricorn. No, it's not in fallen. It's in its detriment in Capricorn, because it rules Cancer, and so it's okay to think about your own interests. I mean, you should think about your own interests. It's that time of year, isn't it? I don't know what it's like in the southern hemisphere, but certainly in the northern hemisphere, September is a month where we often feel that we might have been left behind. I mean, maybe it relates to one's childhood, because September is the beginning of a new school year, and so everything changes. But now, perhaps as adults, one realizes we're not going to school anymore, but we're still aware of the passing of time. Maybe it's just something seasonal, or maybe it's just me. And so with September, the moon moving into Capricorn, many Cancerians might be thinking about what they haven't done and what they haven't achieved. And of course, Cancer can be quite a nostalgic sign that's thinking about the past, and there could even be something a little bit sort of wistful about the moon moving into Capricorn, and perhaps feeling that you have to get some things sorted out, and you have to look after yourself, because otherwise it might just be too late. Though the moon in Capricorn, it is in your opposite sign, and so there could well be a relationship angle to the moon in Capricorn, especially as it's making a trine to the sun. And so moon trine sun indicates to me that you have an opportunity to get on well with certain people. So if there's something that needs to be said, a message that needs to be delivered, I think you'll do it very well. You'll get the balance right. I mean, moon trine sun is an incredibly harmonious aspect, which is, it is well balanced. And so, you will know what to say, and you will know what you can get away with. And so if something is important and it needs to be communicated, then now would be the time to do it. You really will be able to get your message across. And don't forget, Cancer, that Mercury is moving into Virgo. The sun is already in Virgo. So Mercury, the communication planet, moving into Virgo, that really indicates that if there's anything to be said, anything you've been planning on saying, but you perhaps didn't have the opportunity in the past, and now you can say it very clearly. And this might apply to relationships. Certain relationships have reached a stage where they might be a bit stuck. Something hasn't been understood, but through the right words, you can change everything, and things can be be sorted out. And perhaps if there have been recent incompatibilities, there may be a way to smooth them over, but not by brushing them under a carpet, by facing them and just saying, okay, there are differences of opinion, and maybe they can be resolved. Leo, you're not entirely happy with the way things are. As far as you're concerned, Leo, things really could be better. Now, I'm not saying that things aren't absolutely great right now. I mean, they may be. They probably are. You've just had Mercury moving through your sign, and it's that hopefully has given you a boost. You've thought about what you can do. You've thought about all the possibilities in front of you, and so there's good reason to feel confident. But still, it's not quite good enough. It doesn't feel quite good enough, and that's probably a good thing. I mean, there's no excuse for complacency, and I don't think you are complacent. And so, if you really feel that things should be better, then, well, it's probably a good idea to act on that feeling and to keep going, and make sure that you use every minute of every hour of the day, provided you get enough sleep and you look after yourself, and really aspire to new heights. And your ability to do hard and detailed work at the moment, Leo, is really very good. And so if something needs to be done, then I think you're going to be able to do it very quickly, very very effectively. And additionally, the moon in Capricorn makes a trine to the sun in Virgo. Of course, the sun is your ruler, so moon trine sun does make you more practical than usual, and allows you to concentrate on the things that matter. And one thing that matters might be money, making sure that you're paid, that you're getting enough. If you're not getting enough, if you feel concerned about your financial well-being, then I'm really confident that there is something that you can do about it. And it may not be easy, but you're not going to rest on your laurels. And so, keep going, keep pushing. And you don't have to do anything dramatic. It's not about being impulsive or violent. It's about just deciding on what's important, and you just keep going, and you keep going until you eventually achieve it. And so that's perhaps what your priority is, what your priority should be. And your understanding of all things connected with money and matter and possessions is really very good, and it's grounded, and that is important. Perhaps recently you haven't been too grounded. You've sort of you've drifted off, or perhaps there's been some wishful thinking, but now it's real. And Leo, I think that you can very much gain from this new sense of reality. Virgo. Mercury is moving into your sign. It's not just moving into your sign. It's moving on to the fixed star Regulus. I think that the fixed star Regulus is around 0 degrees 11 minutes Virgo, or maybe it's 0 degrees 12 minutes Virgo. I mean, the last time I looked, a couple of weeks ago, it was 0 degrees 11 Virgo, I think. And so, Regulus is the royal star, and it is connected with success. And so with Mercury moving into your sign on Regulus, this should be a great time for you, and really take advantage of Mercury as it moves through Virgo, as it moves through your sign. Remember, Mercury rules Virgo. And so between now and I think it's September the 18th that Mercury leaves Virgo and moves into Libra, really make sure you give it your best shot, and be imaginative, and use your brain, and use your ability to understand, and your ability to organize, and also your ability to sort the wheat from the chaff. I mean, that is a real Virgo concept, sorting out the wheat from the chaff. Virgo can be overwhelmed. If you try to look at every single detail coming your way, it can be overwhelming. You can't distinguish between what's important and what's not important. But now with Mercury moving into Virgo, this is something you very much can do. And so, Virgo, decide what is important. Okay, you don't have to make any decisions necessarily today, but over the next 2 or 3 weeks, while Mercury moves through your sign, do make those decisions. And some things, they might be very interesting, but have you got the time to give them the energy they deserve? Possibly not. So, decide what matters. And as far as today is concerned, we do have the moon in Capricorn. And the moon in Capricorn makes a trine to the sun in Virgo. So that trine between the moon and the sun can make you just feel happy. So today it's not just about getting things done. It's about feeling good about yourself, feeling that you're doing something of real value. And don't allow a feeling of passing pessimism at the beginning of the day to upset you. It could happen because we do have Mercury making a quincunx to Saturn. So what that means is that Mercury, just before it changes sign, just before it moves into Virgo, in very, very late Leo, it makes a 150-degree aspect to Saturn. And so what that might mean is that you have a passing feeling of pessimism, even hopelessness. It's just passing. You might think it's all too much. And then it goes. Mercury moves into Virgo and you realize that things really are okay. So what you don't want is a feeling of pessimism to continue longer than it should do. I mean, sometimes it's good to be pessimistic, to think, oh, this is bad, this is hopeless. But then, provided you move to the next feeling, which is, well, what am I going to do about it? And with Mercury moving into Virgo, that very much provides you with the answer. And so, I'm really very optimistic about today for you. And you just need to concentrate on what matters, and don't allow extraneous detail to upset your equilibrium. Don't worry too much about what's happening, for example, on the planet on which you're living. Although it may be difficult to shut out the news, I think that many Virgos are going to be quite sensitive to what's happening around you, perhaps in your country, in the world, and you're certainly aware of heavy collective forces which could in the end influence all of us, but you don't want to worry about them too much. What matters at the moment, Virgo, is that you make sense of your particular corner of the world and that you are able to really make the most of it all. And I think that that is something that you really are going to be able to do. Libra. Moon is in Capricorn. And with the moon moving in Capricorn, Libra, you may feel that you want to look after your own interests. I mean, moon in Capricorn is quite a selfish placement. And there's nothing wrong with selfishness, by the way. It's thinking about what matters to you and making sure, for example, that you are secure, that your vital interests, your family, they're all in good order, they're all in good shape, and you don't have to go out of your way to do anything. Especially if that pressure comes from outside. Yeah, there might be pressure for you to do something that you don't necessarily want to do, but your first priority is yourself and your own vital interests. And it's important that no one makes you feel guilty. I mean, people could, and particularly as you're a Libran. I mean, Librans, don't like to say no, and they like to make everyone happy. That's great, but you don't want to take it too far, and you want to make sure that everything is in order, and everything is properly balanced, and also the moon in Capricorn is making a trine to the sun in Virgo. That's one of the main aspects, arguably, of the day, moon trine sun, and that moon trine sun works very well for you, provided you handle it in the right way. It doesn't really gravitate towards, for example, wild socializing, feeling you have to be here, there, and everywhere. You don't. And so, Libra, if you can just stay put, that might be the best approach. But just because you're in one place, just because you're looking after your own interests, doesn't mean that you have to be a totally sort of negative, serious influence. Once you're feeling grounded and secure, then you can start to feel positive and optimistic, as I think you have been at some level over the last couple of days, and you can see possibilities. And you can see possibilities not just in your own life, but in other people's life. And you're going to be very good at helping other people to feel good about themselves. I mean, that could be your family. I mean, your family should be your main priority. And of course, I don't know about your particular circumstances. Maybe you don't have any family around you, but if you do, then you can make them feel happy, content, and you can encourage people to see further. Sometimes people can have this incredibly limited perspective, and they only see the negatives. They only see what's in front of their nose, and they can't see the wider possibilities. But you can, and as far as the way you talk and the way you communicate, once you get into the swing of things, you can be very compelling, but compelling in your own territory. You don't have to go somewhere else. If you're in sort of unfamiliar territory, then you're not going to be so effective. So do play on your strengths, not just your strengths in general as a Libran, but your strengths at the moment. And at the moment, too much movement is probably going to weaken your overall impact. Today, there's very much a sort of right way of doing things and a wrong way. And, one final warning, don't do anything out of character. I mean, you've already got that impression anyway, because I've suggested you try to be sort of keep things safe, keep things secure, but don't do anything out of character, anything you've never done before. Don't take risks, because things might go wrong, because you're just unfamiliar. You don't necessarily know what you're doing, and don't also put yourself in a position where you might get unexpectedly angry or annoyed. Now, that's not something one normally associates with Libra, but if you're put in a situation which is stressful, where you don't know the rules, then you might respond very badly. I mean, you're kind of trying to assert your individuality, but it's not entirely effective, and things could go wrong. So that's another reason, Libra, that today you really need to sort of play it safe, but you don't have to limit yourself. You just have to do what you're good at, and do what you're comfortable with. Scorpio. Right now, Scorpio, we have the moon moving through Capricorn, and it's a fairly easygoing place for the moon to be. If you're a Scorpio, and the moon is making a trine to the sun, and with that moon trine sun, Scorpio, I think that you're going to be feeling quite good about yourself. I think that your social skills are going to be pretty good. You can get on with most people. I mean, I know that Scorpio can have a certain reputation for being quite shy and retiring and keeping things to themselves, but you can get on with people without revealing anything, without compromising yourself. And additionally, we do have Mercury moving out of Leo into Virgo, and so with Mercury moving into Virgo, some of your focus might change. I think that while Mercury has been in Leo, your mind had been focused on perhaps one thing. You might have been very single-minded. There might have been one thing that was really important to you. You wanted to deal with it. But now that Mercury is moving into Virgo, there seem to be more possibilities, and you need to be seeking more possibilities. And what kind of possibilities might they be? Well, it might be social possibilities. You don't need to restrict yourself to any sort of one group of people, and there may be new people you need to interact with. And additionally, Scorpio, perhaps you need to think further ahead in terms of how you look at the future. Perhaps when you were looking at the future recently, you were maybe looking a month ahead, 2 months ahead. Now maybe you should be looking a year ahead, 2 years ahead, 5 years ahead, and thinking about how your actions right now in early September 2025 might link to what's happening in, say, 2027, for example. And do think about the future, and what kind of future you want for yourself. And that's different from ambition. Ambition is just too, the whole concept of ambition is too limited. I mean, maybe it's just how we use the word ambition and the connotations that the word ambition has, but ambition and the longer term future, they're not quite the same thing. They might even be at odds with one another. One can have particular goals, one can throw everything one's got into achieving them, and you do achieve the goals perhaps, but you're no further than you were at the beginning in terms of understanding your future and making sense of your future. So do think about what's going on in a few years' time. It does matter, and so having more flexibility and not being so single-minded and single-pointed might be quite a good thing. And also do avail yourself of other people and what other people have got to contribute. Sometimes Scorpios can be a little bit negative, and you only look at the downside of things. And it's possible that there are other approaches, other opinions, and you might find, for example, that certain other people are more optimistic, more positive than you. They see possibilities that you don't seem to be fully aware of, and it's easy to be dismissive of other people's optimism. But I think it's a time when you should be listening, and you should be trying to understand what other people are trying to say. And of course, that would especially apply in close relationships. So if, for example, a partner or a spouse has an idea, has a suggestion that at first you're not particularly into, it seems unrealistic, do give them a second chance. Do give them a chance to explain themselves, and perhaps you certainly shouldn't be dismissive, and because other people at the moment very much have something to offer, and it would be a shame if you were just to close your eyes, ignore it, and just think only about your particularly subjective perception of the future. Because the future is not just about you. It's not just you creating a future. You can perhaps create the future with other people's help. Sagittarius. There is now increasing emphasis in the sign Virgo. So we've got the Sun in Virgo, and Mercury is moving into Virgo. We've got the South Node in Virgo as well. And so what this means, Sagittarius, is that you are thinking about some of your ambitions. What would you like to achieve? What would you like to do? And you're not happy to just stay in one place. You're looking for action, and not just vague action which has concrete results. And you may even be thinking about the rewards. I mean, the moon is making a trine to the sun. The moon in Capricorn making a trine to the sun in Virgo. You're thinking about, how can you benefit? Well, there is a very real financial dimension to the trine between the moon and the sun. Moon is in Capricorn. I mean, moon in Capricorn, you could say, is quite a selfish placement for the moon, very different from the moon in Sagittarius. And so you are thinking about your own best interests, and really there's nothing wrong with that. And I think it's just important, Sagittarius, that you decide what is important, and that you do give it your best. Give it your best shot, and additionally make sure that you are properly rewarded. Now, you might think that the rewards aren't good enough, in which case it's possible that you can do something about it. Though Sagittarius, with these planets in earth signs, we've got Sun, Mercury, Moon, all of them in earth signs. It is really of some importance that you are grounded. It's not a crazy day. It's maybe not a typically Sagittarian day. I mean, okay, we still have Venus in Leo, we still have Venus in the fire sign, we've got Neptune in Aries, but it's not as fiery as it used to be. Mercury is moving out of Leo, and so Sagittarius, it's important that you concentrate on what matters right now, and you don't be too impatient. It's easy to be impatient, to want action, right now. And, if you don't get that action, you might be irritated, especially as Mars is getting closer and closer to that square of the sun, square of Jupiter. So, Mars is now, just over a degree away from a square of Jupiter. And it's going to be exact. I think it's on Friday that Mars is exactly square Jupiter. So in a few days' time, Mars will be square Jupiter. And that could be encouraging you to just want action now, being very hasty, being impatient. And also today, by the way, heliocentrically, we've got Mars trine Jupiter. So, you really want things to happen, and you can feel the energy, but you have to take things as slowly as you can. And then there's a question, well, what if you can't contain yourself? What if you feel that something absolutely has to be done? Well, in that case, Sagittarius, you have to perhaps accept the situation, but you also need to have some discipline and focus. And, it's kind of like a fusion reactor, isn't it? I mean, they haven't created a fusion reactor, but, the fusion reactor is, it's the energy of the sun, which you're trying to use to create electricity, or it's like taking a hydrogen bomb, isn't it? And the energy behind a hydrogen bomb, but doing something constructive with it. So how do you hold it all together without there being a big explosion? I mean, I don't know anything about fusion, but maybe that's the challenge for you. You have this energy, and you've got to use it properly. And so it's not just about today, it's over the next few days, as that Mars square Jupiter becomes exact. And, perhaps also, Sagittarius, it's about taking the energy of the universe, really primal energy, and using it as a fuel for your own individuality, your own individual self-expression, and thinking about what you're really good at and what you're really accomplished at, and you know what these accomplishments are, but have they been given the opportunities that are needed? And so maybe you can take the energy of the universe to fuel who you are, but you've got to keep it all together, and that really does matter. And maybe a good image at the moment might be the tarot card Temperance. I think it is Temperance is a tarot card associated with Sagittarius, if I remember rightly. And the Crowley Book of Thoth tarot card for Temperance is a rather sort of angelic figure, if I remember rightly, with this cauldron trying to put everything together, and it's Temperance bringing everything together. So you take everything that you are, you put it in the cauldron, and you're trying to fuse it all and bring something out of it. And from an alchemical point of view, it would be looking for the philosopher's stone or whatever it is. And so that's perhaps how you need to be dealing with the challenges of today, and not just today. Over the next few days. Yes, you've got to be very disciplined. You've got to decide what's important, but you've also got to take advantage of everything that you are, and take advantage of this immense energy that you're generating. So you can do it, Sagittarius, if you just remember, who you are and the kind of person that you are. And it requires discipline, and it requires some temperance. Capricorn, Moon is now in your sign, and the moon in your sign is making a trine to the sun, and so that is a very fortunate aspect. And you finally feel connected. I think that over the last few days, even weeks, Capricorn has been trying to align with the world and its challenges, and it hasn't always been easy. And there may have been times where you just felt that you were quite sort of separate, but now things are coming together, and the moon trine sun is about wholeness, and you finally sort of feeling in harmony with yourself. And the moon in Capricorn is about you maybe returning to who you are, and returning to your own priorities. And at the same time, it's important not to be limited. You need to think about what is possible, and you don't necessarily know everything. It would be nice to know everything. It wouldn't be nice to think that everything was just laid out as it is. You don't have to cause problems by learning about something new, discovering something new. It would be best if you didn't have to make those discoveries. But information comes your way. You have realizations, perhaps, with moon trine the sun, and there is some fine tuning, and perhaps you have the humility now and the confidence to be able to make sense of it all. And also, don't forget that Saturn is now in Pisces. Saturn has been in Aries, and as I think I said yesterday, with Saturn moving into Pisces, it's very important that you are aware of new pieces of information. The information will be coming your way, not just now, but between now and the middle of February. And so you haven't got the full picture, and so you should be seeking the missing pieces of the puzzle, and then you're going to be ready to sort of move to the next level. But certainly in the short term, I think that you're in a great position, and you're in a great position to ask the right questions. And additionally, we have Mercury moving out of Leo into Virgo, so Mercury is moving into an Earth sign. So you could say that Mercury in Virgo is making a trine relationship to Capricorn, and Mercury in Virgo does allow you to ask important questions. It might not be easy to begin with because Mercury makes a quincunx to Saturn. And so what that Mercury quincunx Saturn might mean, I think it's more about the beginning of the day, Mercury quincunx Saturn, about some piece of information coming your way that doesn't make sense, or something you're told, you don't want to hear it, you like to pretend that it didn't exist, that it didn't matter, but you know it does matter. And as Mercury moves into Virgo, you're ready to deal with the new. Perhaps yesterday you weren't really able to to deal with something outside your normal experience, but now you can be more open-minded. And once you start being open-minded, things will move. And over the course of the day, you have a new sense of sort of hope and power and purpose, and you realize perhaps that there are many things that can be achieved, and also the power of your personality is enough. If you want something, you can get it, and your enthusiasm, you can be enthusiastic. I mean, enthusiasm is not a word that's perhaps normally associated with Capricorn, but you can be enthusiastic today, and I think that other people can pick up on this enthusiasm. Aquarius, with the moon moving into Capricorn, you may feel a bit uncertain. You're not quite sure about the way things are supposed to be. Perhaps you thought you knew, but now it's not quite so clear. And it's not just about the moon moving into Capricorn, it's the fact that Mercury is moving into Virgo, and you've got a lot of earth signs, earth emphasis rather. Moon moving into Capricorn, you've already got Sun in Virgo, you've got Mercury moving into Virgo. It doesn't feel entirely comfortable. And Aquarius, I think that you're perhaps being challenged to look at things in a different way, not feel that you have to, always be original, coming up with your own material, being the initiator. That's not really what it's about. And I think that it perhaps is a time when you maybe need to be more passive. Just watch what's going on. Perhaps listen to what other people are doing or saying rather, and not feeling that you absolutely have to reveal things, because some things are best kept secret, and you know that. And with the moon, with Mercury moving out of Leo into Virgo, that can also give you second thoughts about another person and whether another person can be trusted. And it might have been very easy to talk to someone else, but now not quite so easy. It might be more strained. So Aquarius, perhaps you shouldn't try, and perhaps also you should be more self-contained. I mean, Aquarius is a fairly self-contained sign anyway, but now in particular, you can feel yourself, you can feel your energy, and you don't need any help. You don't need any outside support. Not really. You can be yourself. You can watch. You can learn. You can think. You can feel, and that might be all there is to it. And the less connections you have, or at least fewer direct connections you have with the world around you, I think at some level the happier you're going to be. Pisces. The moon is in Capricorn and it's making a trine to the sun. So moon trine sun, Pisces, might say something about other people, how you are able to get on with other people, and it does seem that you can get on with people very well in a very sort of natural way, provided you put your own interests first. That's always going to be important, especially now that Saturn has moved back into your sign. So by all means listen to what other people are saying, but don't take it too far. It's not a time to be told what to do. You just have to listen, but without necessarily acting, because it's down to you to make the final decision, and just don't forget that. I mean, don't just go with what's easiest. Maybe the easiest option is to just go with the flow, especially as the sun is now moving towards the south node. So the sun moving towards the south node in Virgo, over the next sort of week, you may feel a certain pull to do things other people's way, to do what you're told, to put the other person first. But that's not the right approach. You need to think about what is right for you. And I think that is tremendously important. Additionally, we've got Mercury moving into Virgo, and Mercury moving into Virgo, that might also say something about relationships. It could be someone new moving into your life. I mean, that makes perfect sense. Mercury is ruler of Virgo. Virgo is your opposite sign. Mercury can be a representative of the other. And so that might be a person potentially moving into your line of vision, or it could be someone moving into your life, but at first you don't see it. You don't really notice it. Someone doesn't say much. You're not looking, but they're there. And maybe at a later stage you realize they're there, or maybe it's a sudden realization. But look at what's happening around you in your social life, and it just maybe there's a subtle change going on. And if you're in an existing relationship, Mercury changing signs, Mercury moving into Virgo, that could represent a partner who is very set in their ways. Now, you don't normally associate Mercury and Virgo as being set in its ways, because Mercury is a mutable sign. But Mercury is in its own sign, and so there is a certain stubbornness to Mercury and Virgo. So it could be another person who really thinks they know the answers and they've got good arguments. And Pisces, you should consider the possibility that they do know the answers, but just because someone knows all the answers and has got it all right, or appears to have got it all right, doesn't mean that you should just do what you're told. Don't be overwhelmed by a sort of a barrage of arguments and sort of clever statements to thinking that well, if someone else knows more than you, then you should do things their way. Well, they might know more than you, but that doesn't mean to say that you should abandon your own individuality. Your individuality at the moment, it really does matter. So that is an aspect of today. But aside from other people, it might be a time, Pisces, where you need to look at what's happening, all around you, and ask yourself, what is the best way of responding to the challenge? The challenge of existing in this world. It's a challenge we all have to face. What's the best way of responding? And some of us might feel alienated. We might feel even out of date. Times are changing. What can we do? Well, it does seem, Pisces, that you can do something. And if you think about it, you're well equipped. You're well equipped to deal with these new challenges, even if they seem almost futuristic, outside of your normal experience. Don't panic. You have got what it takes. You have got particular abilities which are needed in 2025. And now might be a time when you can start to really tune into these abilities. Okay, it's not just about today. It's about perhaps the next week. So think about what you've got, and don't ever think that you're out of date or that you're behind the curve, because you're not. And it's all about being optimistic and having a right attitude. And you can be someone who is completely relevant. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And it's now time to look at the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 48, which is the well. And the well has no moving lines. So with no moving lines, it may be that today not a great deal is happening, at least for you. And so, the well is, in fact, quite a static hexagram. It's about just something that doesn't change. The well is always there. The well always needs to be there. We need water, and the water is in the well. Without the well, we can't survive. The community can't survive, and the well can represent a resource that sometimes we take for granted, and sometimes we forget it's there, but we can always go back to it. And so that might be another way of looking at it. But it's of course important that the well is maintained. I mean, the water can be there, but if the lining of the well is falling apart, then of course we can't get access to the water under the ground. Or if there's a bucket to draw the water up and the bucket gets broken, well, we're stuck, aren't we? And so there's perhaps something in our life that should always be there. If there are times of trouble, if we need sustenance, it's just always there for us. And we just need to make sure that it's in good order. And if we do that, we're going to be fine. And maybe it's just saying that really there isn't much to worry about, provided we focus on the things that matter. Or perhaps it's the one thing that matters. And so that might be how the well works. And the well does have a nuclear hexagram. Because, every hexagram has a nuclear hexagram, but I look at the nuclear hexagram when it's locked, when we don't have any moving lines. And the nuclear hexagram, the hexagram in the middle of the well, is hexagram number 38, which is hexagram number 30, which is opposition. And this may say something about our overall feelings. Greg Winkup just calls this hexagram estrangement. So we might feel separated, at odds with the world in which we live. And that can be somewhat disconcerting. But we're reminded here that it doesn't matter if we're on our own. It doesn't matter if other people don't like us, if we've lost contact with people. It doesn't matter, because we have what we need, and what we need is the well. And it may not just be water. We have to be sort of symbolic about it. And so we don't have to look elsewhere for our sustenance, because we've got it all. And all we have to just make sure that when we look at our various resources, that they're all in good order. And that may be all there is to be said. So I now want to go back to the astrology and look at Mercury in Virgo before looking at this assassination in Ukraine. So So here it is. Let's look at the chart for the moment Mercury moves into Virgo. I'm not going to spend a long time on Mercury in Virgo, but it is a big event, or a reasonably big event, particularly as I do daily horoscopes. So Mercury moves into Virgo today at 2:23 p.m. London time. And there you can see Mercury is exactly at 0 degrees 0 minutes Virgo, and so Mercury's already been quite strong, because Mercury in late Leo was in mutual reception to the Sun, because Mercury was in the sign of the Sun, and the Sun was in the sign of Mercury. So it's not like Mercury suddenly gained a load of strength through being in Virgo, but still it is able to maintain its strength. And with Mercury moving into Virgo, that's another planet in an Earth sign. As I was saying at the beginning of this video, there is an increasing sort of Earth emphasis here, and Mercury in Virgo, well, it stays in Virgo I think until September the 18th, and so this is a time for analysis and thinking about what things are really like. And this could say something about how people are behaving, out there in the world, that perhaps in the recent past, over the summer in the northern hemisphere, the winter in the southern hemisphere, there's been quite a lot of wishful thinking. People have assumed that everything is fine, that things are going to sort themselves out. They are prepared to believe the narrative that most suits their agenda or makes them feel comfortable. And now that the Mercury has moved into Virgo, that's not quite so easy. Mercury in Virgo has to look at the facts, and the facts, might be very obvious. And don't forget that when Mercury moves into Virgo, it pretty quickly makes a square to Uranus, because Uranus is at 1 degree 27 Gemini, and that is important. Remember, at the end of August, when was it? I think it was August the 23rd. There was a new moon at 0 degrees 23 Virgo. So Mercury is now in touch with the new moon. It's making a conjunction to the degree of the new moon on August the 23rd, and it's square Uranus. So it perhaps brings back into focus the energy of that new moon, and the fact that that new moon on August the 23rd was square Uranus. And so I think that is probably quite important. And so we have to think about, what is Mercury aspecting, looking at national charts. Of course, Mercury is going to be making a conjunction to NATO's Sun, NATO being ratified on August the 24th, 1949, and it's also making a conjunction to Ukraine's Sun, Ukraine having its independence on August the 24th, 1991. So Mercury is hitting Ukraine and NATO. The Sun hit it not so long ago, but now Mercury is there as well, and Mercury is making a square to Uranus. So, Mercury square Uranus, perhaps relating to Ukraine, but perhaps elsewhere. It's about the message. It's about PR. And that may be a big feature of Mercury. How do we get people to understand our view? How do we get people to believe? But Mercury is in Virgo. And, as I was saying, old narratives which were perhaps based on hope may be more difficult to peddle, because Mercury is in Virgo. Mercury is an earth sign. You kind of got to face reality with Mercury in Virgo. But it is well placed, and Mercury is on Regulus. And so, it is a time that, all of us, if we've got something to say, now might be the time to say it, especially as it's on Regulus. Maybe we can talk to important people. Regulus is the royal star. And so that might be a way in which Mercury on in Virgo conjunct Regulus works. So finally, I want to look at the assassination that took place over the weekend. And it took place on Saturday, August the 30th. And the man assassinated his name was Andriy Parubiy. I probably haven't pronounced that right. And he was a nationalist Ukrainian politician. And he first came to prominence, I believe, in the late 1980s, at the time the Soviet Union was falling, getting involved in sort of far-right causes, with particular emphasis on the history of Ukrainian nationalism and Ukrainian resistance against communism, and presumably against the Poles as well. There's a long history there. And so you could say that he was maybe something of a teenage Nazi. I mean, he was involved in something called the Social National Party. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a teenage Nazi. I mean, it happens. One goes through a phase. But what if it just continues? In 2018, when he was in his 40s, he was on record as saying the greatest man who practiced direct democracy was Adolf Hitler in the 1930s. So that gives you an idea of the kind of person we're dealing with. And he's was involved in Ukrainian nationalism and politics through his adult life, and he was involved in the Orange Revolution in 2004, and then in 2014 he had close involvement in the Maidan Revolution, or the Maidan Revolt, or however you want to call it. And there is a view that he was sort of connected with the sniper attacks at Maidan Square. I mean, it does seem that the sniper attacks, the Russians were originally accused of it, but it does seem that it was a bit of a red flag operation. And also, I think there was involvement with him and the fire in Odessa, where a lot of sort of Russian speakers were held up in a trade union building, I think on May the 1st, 2014, and a lot of them were burnt to death. And many Ukrainian nationalists regard this as a wonderful event, as a sort of seminal event. So that's the kind of person we're dealing with, and he authorized apparently the shelling of civilians in Donetsk. So you can see that he would potentially be a target. And he became chairman of the Ukrainian parliament. And so there is certainly an argument to say that the Russians would have been, very keen on killing him, but there may have been other factions that wanted to kill him, maybe factions within the Ukrainian political system. That's possible. That he might have known too much, or he might have been a rival for one group or another. So it's not necessarily the case that the Russians assassinated him, but they certainly would have had good reason to. And here is his horoscope. So he was born on January the 31st, 1971. I don't know what time he was born. It says that he was born. I've got Sokal, the town of Sokal near Lvov. He wasn't born there, but I think this town, Sokal, was about 7 kilometers from where he was born. And as I don't have a time of birth, it doesn't really matter. So he was an Aquarius, and, he had the moon in Aries. And so, moon in Aries, that says something about his teens, perhaps. So if you've got the moon in Aries, as a teenager, you might be quite impulsive, and you might get attracted to extreme philosophies, and you might want to be quite open about your views. So that might be moon in Aries. But this moon in Aries perhaps continued through his adult life, just a particular attraction maybe to violence. That is certainly one way of looking at it. And it's connected with a conjunction between Jupiter and Neptune and Mars. So Jupiter-Neptune, in terms of what it means, Jupiter and Neptune can be about religion. I don't know how religious he was, but it can also be about ideology. And yeah, it's a very ideological combination, that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. And you throw Mars in as well. So Mars conjunct Jupiter, conjunct Neptune. So that might be someone who is prepared to act violently in pursuit of a particular ideology. Interestingly, that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, sort of, this was the early 1971. I mean, I'm sure this isn't relevant, but I'm just pointing it out anyway. Is that the World Economic Forum had its first meeting just a week before his birth, and the World Economic Forum had a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in its chart in Sagittarius. Going beyond the borders, not having to worry about governments and what governments want to do. We can go beyond all that, and being very idealistic about some sort of global solutions to the world's supposed problems. But anyway, I think that's just a matter of coincidence. But we can also see the different ways in which Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions can work. So I think that Mars, Jupiter, Neptune in Sagittarius, really is relevant. Sagittarius can be a very ideological sign. I mean, it's ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is in Sagittarius, and so Jupiter in Sagittarius can have strong beliefs about right and wrong. I mean, he can be very certain that he is right. And you throw the moon in Aries in, and you can see he's prepared to act on that as well. Now, I sort of mentioned that he was perhaps a teenage Nazi, and he has certainly expressed sympathetic opinions about Adolf Hitler. So why might he have idolized Nazi Germany? Well, there is a strong strand amongst Ukrainian nationalists to idolize Nazi Germany. I mean, of course, a lot of Ukrainians did join the German war effort. You had the SS Galicia, which was an SS regiment composed mainly of Ukrainians. But there might be something in particular about him. And, for example, look at his Saturn. His Saturn is at 1553, so 1553 Taurus. So Saturn is about how he brings everything together, what his kind of superego is. Isn't that a good way of looking at Saturn? Saturn is about, what you look up to. And it's just kind of interesting that his Saturn at 1553 Taurus is pretty close to Hitler's Venus-Mars conjunction. So Hitler had a Venus-Mars conjunction at 17 Taurus, which was close to his Saturn. So maybe him knowing about Hitler with that Saturn, he was sort of picking up on that Venus-Mars. So that is a possibility. Additionally, he was born on January the 31st. So January the 31st is almost the anniversary of the Nazis coming to power in Germany. So here's a horoscope of Nazi Germany. So Nazi Germany came to power with the sun. Hitler came to power. He became chancellor at the time that the sun was at 10 degrees 5 Aquarius and Saturn was at 7 degrees 30 Aquarius. So we go back to his chart, and so his sun is within a degree of Nazi Germany's sun, and I think that's possibly an important lineup. And thinking about assassinated Nazis or assassinated extreme nationalists. He also has a birthday which is very close to that of Wilhelm Gustloff. So Wilhelm Gustloff, this is just a coincidence maybe. I think it's more than a coincidence maybe, that Wilhelm Gustloff was a Swiss Nazi he was born on January the 30th, 1895. So he's got his sun at 10 Aquarius. And Wilhelm Gustloff was assassinated in Davos, home of the World Economic Forum. And so it's all kind of linking up, isn't it? He was assassinated in Davos by a Jewish student in the 30s, and so he's got his sun at 10 degrees Aquarius. So there may be just something about 10 Aquarius that has this sort of link with Nazi Germany. I mean, it's quite an extreme thing to do for someone in their 40s, to say that the greatest man who practiced direct democracy was Adolf Hitler in the 1930s, to say anything positive about Adolf Hitler. And of course now that has been sort of brushed under the carpet. He goes to America, he goes to Canada, he's feted by the Americans, he's feted by the Canadians. I think he sort of meets various sort of NATO officials, and anyway, he's dead now. So as far as his assassination is concerned, here is the chart for the assassination. It took place at August 30th, 2025. I looked at the CCTV footage, and it seemed to happen at around 10:35, indeed 30 seconds afterwards. And this chart does have Mars rising, and so kind of. I mean, it's 5 degrees from the ascendant, so it's not exactly rising. So I'm not saying that the chart itself is especially dramatic. One might ask what the assassination was about, and I know that the general consensus seems to be that the Russians were involved. They certainly had good reason, but the moon is in the second. The moon is in Scorpio in the second house, and so if it wasn't the Russians, maybe it had something to do with money. I mean, that's possible. I'm not saying that is right, but it's interesting that the moon is in the second, and the moon is at 26 degrees Scorpio. The moon is void of course. It is making a quincunx to Chiron, so nothing much seems to be going on. So you would have thought maybe with the moon void of course, perhaps the assassination attempt wouldn't work. So if you had been planning this assassination, would you have gone for the moon being void of course? So anyway, here is an example of something working, at least from a perspective of the assassin, that the assassination certainly succeeded. There is a report that the culprit has been caught. Of course, the Ukrainians would say that. Maybe they've caught someone. Doesn't mean they did it. But that's a broad chart. I don't regard that chart as being especially spectacular. By the way, I don't know about that moon quincunx Chiron. I mean, I don't think that in itself is particularly significant. And then there is a question, what about his transits? How did this was a transit for his death? I mean, what was going on? And so, if we look at his chart and we look at the transits for the death, Jupiter was at 2 degrees 34 Cancer, and so Jupiter was sesquiquadrate his Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. And so I think that with Parubiy, as I've already suggested, I think the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction was an important part of who he was. I mean, I know that it's quite a collective thing, the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in Sagittarius. It doesn't seem very personal, but he seems to have picked up on it. And maybe it's because his Mars was close to his Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. And Jupiter-Neptune is all about, his ideas, his fantasies, his ideals. And then Jupiter comes along, makes a sesquiquadrate to his Jupiter, makes a sesquiquadrate to his Neptune, and that arguably, was the main aspect sort of taking place at the time he was killed. Also, that Mars was at 14 Libra. So we don't know where his moon is. I mean, I've just gone for a noon chart. So Parubiy we certainly know he had the moon in Aries, whether he was born at the beginning of the day or the end of the day. And so Mars opposition moon, well, if you use a whole sign approach, whole sign sort of aspects, Mars opposition moon while Mars is in Libra, it could be a dangerous time for him, perhaps. He has his Uranus at 1329 Libra, and so Mars was triggering his Uranus. But again, Uranus is a transpersonal planet, and normally one doesn't worry too much about Mars on a transpersonal planet. But in this case, it seems to have been relevant. And so his Uranus, Mars, I suppose you could say, Mars on your Uranus can put you at risk of assassination if you are a politician who is involved in nationalist politics in Ukraine, and who already has a history of causing a lot of death and destruction. And so there's Mars conjunct Uranus, and so that kind of fits. And I was also looking at this from a sort of karmic perspective. I mean, he was one of the people who was involved with the fire in Odessa on May the 1st, 2014. So this was when Russian speakers, they were held up in a trade union building on not May the 1st, May the 2nd, sorry, on May the 2nd, 2014. And the building caught fire, and a lot of them burnt to death. And Parubiy was one of the people who was seen to potentially to have been involved with it. And so if you link the Odessa massacre with the shooting, and perhaps this is something one should do, particularly if you took the view that the Russians might have been involved in it. Maybe it's some kind of vengeance. And you think of the Munich Olympics, where these sort of Palestinians killed a lot of Israeli athletes, and the Israelis decided they would just go and kill every single Palestinian terrorist who was involved, and they didn't care how long it took. And so, but maybe there's a sense of the same thing. Maybe the Russians regard the Odessa massacre in the same way that the Israelis regard the massacre of the athletes in 1972, and perhaps they're going to just kill everyone who they think is involved, and however long it takes. I mean, that's just a possibility. And so if we compare the Lviv shooting with the Odessa massacre, if you like, and there are certainly some links here. I mean, we've got a Mars return, sort of. So Mars was at 11 Libra, and so Mars was at 11 Libra at the time of the Odessa massacre, the fire, and so Mars was at 14 Libra when Parubiy was assassinated. So that's certainly one link. And additionally, we've got a Jupiter return as well. So Jupiter was conjunct Jupiter. So there are potentially some links there. I'm not saying that these links are sort of majorly important, but I think they're certainly worth considering. And you do have to look at other things going on in Parubiy's life history. The snipers, for example. There is this question about the snipers at Maidan Square. what was Parubiy's involvement with it? There is a view, certainly in pro-Russian sources, that he was involved with the killings at Maidan Square. But it was a false flag operation, and so here are the sniper killings on Maidan Square on February the 20th, 2014. I think they started at sort of around 9 o'clock in the morning. And if you compare that with Parubiy's chart, I did notice that, he's got his Mars at 5 degrees Sagittarius, and Neptune was at 455 Pisces. So Neptune was square his Mars-Neptune conjunction. And so at the time of the sniper killings, and indeed the whole time of the sort of Maidan color revolution in 2014, he had Neptune square his Mars, square his Neptune, indeed square his Mars-Neptune conjunction. So that might have indicated that he was up to all sorts of things and no one was quite sure, and he had this sort of secret sort of involvement, and maybe with his recent killing it was basically coming back on him. So that is a possibility. I'm not saying that I've completely understood what's happening with his shooting, and I think again it's one of those problems that I don't have his time of birth, and I don't think that the time of his shooting was particularly spectacular. I don't think anyone, for example, used astrology to choose the moment of his assassination. Not that they ever would. Anyway, those are a few thoughts on the assassination of Andriy Parubiy. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.